Negotiations between the US and Iran seem to have reached a deadlock again. The Strait of Hormuz in the Middle East is closed once more. This was officially stated in Tehran, accusing Donald Trump of not honoring certain agreements. Moreover, just a few minutes ago, it became known that militants of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps opened fire on a vessel passing through the Strait of Hormuz, making it clear that it is indeed closed, and it's better not to violate this ban. Moreover, it became known that more than 20 tankers immediately turned around and began to move away from the Strait of Hormuz, despite earlier assurances from the White House that they would ensure the safety of this area. Moreover, Iran even stated that Donald Trump is lying, and Iran responded harshly to Trump's plans to export enriched uranium to the US. Tehran denied Donald Trump's statement about enriched uranium, and they stated that Trump is lying and that Iran is not going to export its enriched uranium anywhere, let alone give it to the Americans. At the same time, there was information that China is ready to take possession of or reduce the enrichment level of the highly enriched uranium that Iran stores on its territory. At the same time, the United States of America went ahead and extended the lifting of sanctions against Russian oil, and they did it at the last moment. Although just yesterday, Scott Bessent, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, stated that they would not extend the lifting of sanctions. This indicates that escalation in the Middle East is likely to increase now, since the lifting of sanctions against Russian oil has been extended until May 16th. Against this backdrop, Donald Trump himself announced today that he has good news, quite good news, regarding negotiations with Iran. And he says that he expects an agreement in the next day or two, although Iran's actions do not indicate at all that they are seeking any kind of agreement. My name is Alexi Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave any comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, let me start with Donald Trump's statement, which really doesn't fit with what's happening in reality. US President Donald Trump announced some fairly good news in the negotiations with Iran, but warned that the ceasefire could end without an agreement. Quote, "It looks like things are going very, very well with Iran in the Middle East. We are negotiating over the weekend. I expect everything to go well. Many of these issues have already been discussed and agreed upon." He went on to emphasize that the main condition for the US remains Iran's renunciation of nuclear weapons. Quote, "The main thing is that Iran must not have nuclear weapons. Iran cannot be allowed to have nuclear weapons, and this is more important than anything else." At the same time, Trump made it clear that if no agreement is reached, the US may withdraw from the truce and continue to apply pressure, including a blockade of Iranian ports. Trump stated that direct negotiations between the US and Iran could take place this weekend. But, as it turned out, it is already fair to seriously doubt whether such plans are realistic. Let me remind you that initially direct negotiations were planned for Thursday, then for Friday, and then for the weekend. Today is Saturday, and the situation in the Middle East does not suggest that we are getting closer to this moment. And against the backdrop of such boastful statements by Donald Trump, the situation around the Hormuz Strait began to escalate significantly. Iran announced strict control over transit and accused the US of violations. A representative of the central headquarters of the Iranian organization Khatam al-Anbiya stated that transit through the Hormuz Strait is once again under strict military control, which means the complete closure of the Hormuz Strait, despite the fact that just yesterday the Iranians opened it. In Iran, this decision was explained by the actions of the United States, in particular the naval blockade, which Tehran called piracy. Next, they will quote the operational command of the Iranian armed forces. "For this reason, control over the Hormuz Strait has been restored, and this strategic waterway is under strict management and control of the armed forces, until the US restores full freedom of navigation for ships traveling from Iran to their destination and from the destination back to Iran. The situation in the Hormuz Strait will remain under strict control as before." Let me note here that yes, indeed. After the Iranians announced the opening of the Hormuz Strait, Trump stated that they would not lift their blockade. Let me remind you, they are blocking the ports and the entire coast of Iran. And today, the chairman of the Iranian Parliament's Committee on National Security and Foreign Policy, Ibrahim Azizi, announced that the Hormuz Strait is closed again and placed the responsibility for this on the actions of the United States. Quote, We warned you, but you didn't pay attention. Now enjoy the Hormuz Strait returning to the way it was before. And right after that, it became known that the Iranians not only made statements, but are already showing through their actions that they are indeed blocking the Hormuz Strait again. In particular, Reuters reports that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps opened fire on a tanker in the area of the Hormuz Strait. Two boats of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps approached the vessel, which was about 20 nautical miles northeast of Oman. After that, they opened fire. Immediately after that, about 20 vessels began to turn around and head toward Oman following Iran's announcement of the closure of the Hormuz Strait. In other words, the IRGC immediately backed up its words with actions. In addition, Iran gave a rather tough response to Trump today regarding his plans to transfer enriched uranium to the US. Let me remind you, yesterday he loudly declared that the Iranians agreed that all the enriched uranium would be taken by the Americans. He was once again theatrically talking about how they would need big excavators to dig up those storage facilities, extract the enriched uranium from there and take it to America. That's it. And today, Iran officially denied Donald Trump's statement about their willingness to hand over nuclear materials to the United States. Specifically, Iran's top diplomat Esmail Baghai stated that the transfer of uranium is not even being discussed. And the official called Trump's words an attempt to pass off wishful thinking as reality. Quote, "The uranium enriched by Iran will not be transferred anywhere. Transferring uranium to the United States was never an option for us." Trump himself, during a speech in Arizona, said that he intends to remove Iran's enriched uranium using excavators. The American president constantly refers to this uranium as a nuclear panel, after Washington's attacks on facilities in Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordow in June of 2025. And yesterday Trump said at a rally, "How will we get nuclear dust? We'll get it together with Iran using a lot of excavators. We'll transport the nuclear materials to the United States. Tehran will not receive any money in exchange." And he also did not rule out the possibility of continuing the war if the deal with Iran falls through. Regarding nuclear weapons and enriched uranium, there is another piece of news here. In particular, Associated Press reports that China is ready to take possession of it, or to reduce the enrichment level of highly enriched uranium that Iran stores on its territory. According to the source, we are talking about approximately 450 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. According to Trump, this is the material that should be removed from Iran as part of any agreement to end the war. The uranium is currently believed to be stored. It is stored under damaged nuclear facilities. At first, Trump wanted the US to take this material themselves. However, Beijing is signaling that it is ready to join in and take this material for itself if Tehran and Washington make such a request. So China itself is offering two options: to either remove the highly enriched uranium to its own territory or dilute it on site to a level suitable for civilian use. This could be a compromise. It will unblock negotiations between the US and Iran. And let me remind you that in 2015, under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was signed by Obama, Iran had already removed its low-enriched uranium. At that time, about 11,000 kilograms were sent to Russia to meet the terms of the nuclear deal. That's it. Now, China could take on a similar role. And against this background, there are all the signs that, unfortunately, it's unlikely a peace agreement between Iran and the US will be reached anytime soon. And the Americans themselves are signaling this. The fact is that today the Office of Foreign Assets Control of the US Department of the Treasury issued a general license that allows transactions related to the sale, delivery, and unloading of Russian oil and petroleum products. Loaded onto vessels as of April 17, 2026. The license is valid until 12 p.m. Eastern Time on May 16, 2026. It replaces the previous license, which was valid from March 19 to April 11. The authorization applies to transactions that are ordinarily necessary for the sale, delivery, or unloading of Russian oil and petroleum products. This includes the safe mooring and anchoring of vessels, ensuring the health and safety of the crew, emergency repairs and environmental measures, vessel management services, crew recruitment, bunkering, pilotage, registration, insurance, classification and salvage, In general, in short, they have fully resumed the lifting of sanctions against Russian oil. Putin's representative Kirill Dmitriev boasted today that we are talking about approximately 100 million barrels of Russian oil, which they will once again sell at sky-high prices. I'll just remind you that yesterday, literally just yesterday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent publicly stated that there is absolutely no need to resume the lifting of sanctions against Russian oil, because they are already approaching a peace agreement with Iran. And if today they urgently issue a new license, it means that most likely the negotiations have collapsed and at the very least may be reaching a dead end. Therefore, until May 16, the Americans are giving themselves another window of opportunity, understanding that most likely the Strait of Hormuz will be closed and oil will not be coming out from there, so they need to release some other oil onto the market. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you consider my work important and necessary and want to support this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or payment. Paid sponsorship subscriptions are available through the links and details in the description of this video or by using the QR code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.